So it is terrific to see so many of you here, actually incredibly good from here. You never know when you organise things like this, and Lighter Footprints has done this with ECAM this time, a joint arrangement, but you never know until this minute what this is going to look like. So thank you so much for coming. I don't think it's an overstatement to say that you're here to raise your concern and alarm at one of Australia's greatest challenges, that of climate change. There have been several indicators recently that our country is not doing well, both in terms of the impact of climate change on the environment, the economy and people's lives, and in terms of what government is doing to address the problem.
While I'm here doing my bit by starting worm farms for my school or educating others regarding correct landfill and recycling items, I reckon it's time the politicians do their bit. So, in 40 years, I can reflect on the time in Australian political history and tell my children that I was witness to one of the greatest shifts in the political discourse of our country, when people stopped talking only of jobs and growth and started talking about our obligations as custodians of the future. Thank you very much.
Before I begin now, just a quick show of hands. Is there anybody here who doesn't believe that human beings are changing the climate and therefore the very nature of the planet? Is there anybody who doesn't think that? Oh, there are a few. 3 I got. What's your name? I'm just keeping a list of people we should eat first.
We're in the middle of a contest between 2 tipping points, those moments when systems change irrevocably. The first tipping point is an ecological one. It involves the impacts of global warming, and since the start of this century, a range of records have been broken as a result. So this year, atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide will rise and remain over 400 parts per million. Never have humans as a species experienced this. The last time this was so was some 23 to 25 million years ago, and then our planet was some 3 to 4 degrees warmer, and sea levels were between 5 and 40 metres higher. 14 of the last 15 hottest years since records began have occurred since the year 2000. The planet's warming faster than expected. 2014 was the hottest year on record, until 2015 was the hottest year on record, until 2016 promises to be the hottest year on record. As a consequence, Arctic summer sea ice is melting to what scientists expect will be a record low this year, and the winter maxima, the extent, has been the smallest recorded for each successive year over the last 13 years. We're rapidly approaching one of our tipping points when dark polar oceans replace the reflective surfaces of ice caps and the planet begins to warm autonomously. There's faster melting of ice in Greenland, contributing to accelerating sea level rise, and the earlier predictions of 20 centimetres to 1 metre by the end of this century are now seeming quite conservative. This process continues for centuries. We've also seen the growing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, floods in Europe, in Australia, fires, storms, and so on. All of this leads to potential insecurity of food, of societies, the abandonment of coasts, population movements. We are fundamentally at the start of a global climate emergency, where each additional tonne of CO2 amplifies the crisis that we're in. There's a second competing tipping point, which is a political and cultural one. I had the privilege of being at Paris last year when the climate negotiations there led to a major promise, a promise of a rapid and accelerating shift to a decarbonised world. The Paris Agreement set the very ambitious goal of keeping warming to as close as possible to 1.5 degrees Celsius and well below 2 degrees. Global emissions at a peak as soon as possible, net greenhouse gas emissions are to be achieved, or net balance in greenhouse gas emissions, zero emissions, achieved within the second half of this century. All countries, 193 parties, including the US and China and other major emitters, agreed to submit their targets for 2030 and to ratchet them up every 5 years, and to produce pathway documents which will see them decarbonise their economies soon after 2050. In 2018, the IPCC will produce a report on the path to 1.5 degrees and its impacts, and I'm sure that this report will have a profound change in mindsets of politicians and others. The Paris Agreement is a promissory note. At present, based on existing national commitments, we're still heading for at least 2.7 degrees Celsius or more. but it's a robust process for improvement to which Australia also committed itself. At Paris, it was also exceptionally clear that the age of carbon is over. Multinational companies banded together and called for an end to fossil fuels, for a price on carbon. They extolled the economic opportunities in burgeoning global renewable industries. This is the big tipping point in Paris, the overwhelming mobilisation of government and business sentiment towards an optimistic, enthusiastic vision of rapid transition and of total decarbonisation, and this is embedded in the agreement itself.
I understand that the environment is an extremely important issue at this election and that people in this room are extremely passionate. And I'm not here to debate the science, indeed I accept the science. I'm here to talk about the best possible way for Australia to tackle the challenge of climate change. And then finally, I wanted to talk about why I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic for one of the reasons that Peter actually described. The fact is we now have so many nations from across the world, he mentioned over 190 countries around the world, who have agreed for the first time to this particular COP21 target. Now, is it enough? It's not enough, and that's why there is going to be these 5-year renewals which Australia has, and reviews that Australia has pushed for, is that the Australian economy is in transition. We are moving away from coal, and that is not a bad thing. In 2004, 77% of our electricity generation came from coal. Today, it's just above 60%, and it is decreasing substantially.
And the government's own data, which it didn't release before the Paris conference and snuck out the week of Christmas, projects that year on year, carbon pollution will continue to go up under direct action and having no renewable energy policy whatsoever beyond 2020, which is the position Josh Frydenberg has. We need to get this back under control. There is not a democracy in the world that has a serious climate change policy that is not subject to bipartisan consensus. I watched the UK general election last year and I was dumbstruck by the sense of comity between all three parties, but particularly the two alternative prime ministers. I think they had a minor disagreement about the proportion of offshore and onshore wind power, but otherwise than that, this policy area is resolved in the UK and so many other countries, particularly democracies. We have to get back to that position.
I want a show of hands. Who here in the room has had your oh shivers moment about climate change? That moment when you realise, geez, this is big. I mean, the science has been telling us for decades that we face a big and growing problem in the future. But that future is now. Today, there is too much carbon in the atmosphere. It's already damaging our health and well-being, our economy, other species, our water supplies, our capacity to grow food. And the reality is that we have a carbon footprint that is enormous and excessive, even as we try to minimise it. And the measures that have been outlined by Josh and by Mark tonight just aren't going to be enough.
And one question that I'd like to ask the panel, and that is, in the next suite that follows July the 2nd, no matter what the outcome, would you three be prepared to go and have coffee and talk to each other about how to move this on in terms of getting some agreement across the parties on climate change?
Absolutely, we can either do it in Melbourne or in Campbell, where we all are. And I think, you know, as Churchill said, well, you'll probably be back sooner or later. You know, as I think as a big theme for tonight, there is a lot of disagreement. It's not in the public's interest for that disagreement to continue. We have to find common ground. It will not suit everybody where that common ground is, but at the end of the day, our jobs are to serve the people, not to serve ourselves.
What about that then? Do you want to? There are complicity. We have an agreement that this kind of movement leads to shifts in the way people think about how much work they have to do together. So well done you.